Tesla just continues to disappoint. Is this all because of Elon Musk's other activities, or have the sort of, first adopters already filled their garages?
Tesla taking the biggest hit, down 6%. That's not the only potential headache for Elon Musk. Leaders in Canada are going after his ventures specifically.
This wasn't a crash. It was an ambush, and the trap had been set years ago. Tesla didn't simply falter. It was targeted by foreign governments, undermined by allies, and caught in the middle of a trade war no one saw coming. Over $135 billion in value vanished. Factories halted. Protesters filled the streets. This isn't just about electric cars anymore. It's the moment America's most powerful tech company got played and lost. So how did Canada and Europe outmaneuver Elon Musk? Why did Wall Street pull the plug first? And what happens when the company that once defined the future suddenly finds itself locked out of it? The EU and Canada's revenge plot. In the weeks after the US kicked off its tariff war, two of its closest allies, Canada and the European Union, struck back, not broadly, but with precision. And they didn't just retaliate against the US as a whole. They zeroed in on Tesla. This wasn't economic self-defense. It was a surgical strike. Canada had been one of Tesla's most loyal markets outside the US. But as tensions rose, the Canadian government made a shocking move. Tesla was removed from the list of electric vehicles eligible for federal rebates. Overnight, Teslas became thousands of dollars more expensive for Canadian buyers, wiping out the brand's competitive edge in the country. Then came blow number two. $43 million in rebate funds, previously promised to dealerships, were suddenly frozen, officially due to audit concerns. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the European Union was quietly setting its own trap. New tariffs targeted specifically at US-made EVs drove Tesla prices out of reach in key countries like Germany, France, and Italy. To make matters worse, several EU nations stopped including Tesla in their national EV incentive programs altogether, shifting those subsidies to local automakers like Volkswagen, Renault, and Stellantis. The message was loud and clear: support European companies, punish Musk. But this wasn't just about money anymore. It got personal. European leaders began publicly criticizing Elon Musk's close relationship with Donald Trump, painting Tesla as a symbol of American arrogance. Tesla had stopped being just a company. It had become a diplomatic casualty. In a single quarter, Tesla's sales in Europe and Canada fell by nearly 40%. Shipping contracts were canceled. International offices started furloughing staff. For the first time since its rapid rise, Tesla was being pushed out of markets that had once been crucial to its growth. The consumer rebellion at home. As international pressure crushed Tesla's presence abroad, a new and even more damaging threat emerged back home, one the company never saw coming. The American consumer began turning on Tesla. It started quietly. A few social media posts calling for boycotts, Reddit threads mocking rising prices, viral clips criticizing Musk's increasingly unpredictable behavior. But by mid-April, the quiet discontent had erupted. Protesters showed up outside Tesla dealerships in battleground states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Signs read, "We voted for you, not for this." Service center employees began facing angry former customers. The brand was unraveling before everyone's eyes. What made this backlash so dangerous was its reach. It wasn't just one group of people. Progressives who once saw Tesla as a climate champion were now angry over Musk's embrace of far-right politics and his public alliance with Trump. Meanwhile, working-class families who had dreamed of owning a Tesla were priced out. Thanks to the tariffs Musk refused to publicly challenge. The outrage only grew louder and more visible. Videos surfaced of frustrated owners smashing their Teslas. One viral clip showed a man spray painting "Traitor" across his Model Y. It racked up millions of views. The message was undeniable. Tesla no longer stood for innovation or hope. It stood for betrayal. In the US, Tesla's market share fell 22% in a single quarter. Dealerships reported inventory piling up, even as prices were slashed. In rural areas, showrooms started laying off staff. The same cars that once symbolized a better future were now reminders of a company and a CEO out of touch with the people who once believed in them. Tesla's image collapse, from innovation to arrogance. Once seen as the future of transportation, Tesla's vehicles were now being viewed as overpriced symbols of political ego. But the real turning point wasn't about cars or policies. It was about Elon Musk himself. We dug deep so you don't have to. No spin, no fluff, just the truth they hoped you wouldn't notice. Hit subscribe. We're only getting started. Elon Musk's public meltdown. As pressure mounted on Tesla, the spotlight naturally shifted to Elon Musk. This was his company, his vision, his empire. The world waited for leadership and calm. Instead, they got chaos. Rather than reassure investors or customers, Musk launched into a storm of social media rants. He mocked regulators, blamed foreign powers for sabotage, and publicly insulted Canadian and European officials. On talk shows and finance podcasts, he appeared defiant, even erratic, tossing out lines like, "If you don't like the volatility, don't buy Tesla." That one quote alone wiped billions off Tesla's valuation, triggering a double-digit stock drop. Behind the scenes, big investors started panicking. Pension funds, hedge funds, and sovereign wealth groups that had backed Musk for years suddenly saw him not as a visionary, but a liability. Quietly, they began unloading their shares. The media had a field day. Every tweet, every interview became a headline. Musk, once seen as a genius, now looked like a CEO unraveling under pressure. Internally, cracks began to show. Executives started distancing themselves. PR teams struggled to contain the damage. Tesla's brand, once defined by clean energy and breakthrough tech, was now becoming synonymous with instability. And while Musk lashed out, Tesla's core business started to crumble. The supplier Revolt Tesla was never as self-sufficient as it claimed. Despite talk of vertical integration, its production relied on a fragile global web of suppliers and partners, from Canadian lithium to German semiconductors. But global cooperation fades fast when politics heat up. It started with Canada. As retaliation for US tariffs, the Canadian government added export fees to critical battery materials. Longtime suppliers, some dating back to the Model S days, raised prices or changed terms. One supplier outright cancelled its contract, citing political instability and currency risks. That move sent a warning shot across the industry. If Canada could walk away, so could everyone else. In Europe, the situation worsened. Musk's public jabs at EU officials had already made suppliers uneasy. Now, emboldened by Canada's actions, those same suppliers demanded upfront payments, or refused to ship entirely until Musk issued public apologies. He didn't. He doubled down. That defiance cost Tesla millions. By mid-April, dozens of European partners had moved their business elsewhere, to safer, more stable players like Volkswagen, Renault, and Stellantis. Tesla had become a red flag in boardrooms. Contracts that once ended with handshakes now came buried in legal risk clauses. Back in the US, Tesla's supply chain team was in full-blown crisis mode. Parts couldn't be secured. Delivery timelines collapsed. Production slowed to a crawl. Costs surged. Musk called emergency meetings, but it was too late. The damage was done. Tesla tried to spin the chaos as temporary, calling it regional disruption or short-term sourcing issues. But behind the scenes, it was clear. Partners who once helped build Tesla's success were now walking away. Every delayed shipment, every broken deal brought the company closer to a cliff. Volkswagen makes its move. Volkswagen wasn't caught off guard by Tesla's downfall. In fact, it had been planning for this moment. While Tesla was chasing headlines, Volkswagen was quietly building its EV empire, investing in battery plants, supply chains, and standardized EV platforms. And when Tesla stumbled, Volkswagen was ready. Subsidy programs across Europe, in Germany, France, and Italy, were reshaped to prioritize local brands. Consumers, already uneasy about Musk's politics, suddenly had a more affordable and stable option in Volkswagen. And Volkswagen didn't hold back. Their pricing strategy was aggressive. Thanks to their modular EV platform, they could produce cars at scale, faster and cheaper, while still offering quality and familiarity. While Tesla floundered under the weight of politics, supply issues, and public backlash, Volkswagen stepped into the vacuum, not just to compete, but to dominate. Volkswagen's strategic victory. Volkswagen didn't just offer hatchbacks, sedans, and SUVs. They offered them at a fraction of Tesla's cost. And unlike Tesla, they weren't bleeding money on every vehicle. Their massive scale and tight grip on their supply chain made them efficient, nationally aligned, and incredibly cost-effective. And they made sure the public knew it. Social media campaigns boomed. The messaging was clear: made in Europe, trusted worldwide. In France, TV ads showed families choosing Volkswagen over Tesla, emphasizing that stability matters. In Germany, editorial pieces praised Volkswagen for keeping jobs local, while Tesla outsourced its problems overseas. By June, Volkswagen had officially surpassed Tesla as the top EV brand in Europe. Dealerships couldn't keep cars on the lot. Government contracts once reserved for Tesla were quietly shifted to Volkswagen. But just as Tesla was losing its grip on Europe, an even bigger threat was preparing to strike. One that didn't just want Tesla's customers, but its crown. BYD's global takeover. While Tesla was bleeding market share across the West, a new competitor was rising in the East, and it wasn't playing nice. BYD, the Chinese EV giant long dismissed as a regional player, had been quietly executing a global expansion plan. And it looked a lot like Tesla's original model, only sharper and more disciplined. They were vertically integrated, politically shielded, globally hungry. And by the time Tesla noticed, BYD had already moved into territories Musk could no longer defend. In Asia, BYD filled the vacuum Tesla left behind. While Musk's company struggled with rising tariffs and anti-American sentiment, BYD offered affordable, reliable EVs tailored to developing markets. Countries like India, Vietnam, and Thailand, eager to electrify their fleets, found BYD ready to deliver at scale and speed. Tesla, still focused on premium price points, looked completely out of touch. Where Tesla had one model, BYD had four. Where Tesla hesitated, BYD shipped. Then came Africa. For years, Musk teased plans to expand on the continent, but delivered nothing. Meanwhile, BYD inked billion-dollar infrastructure deals in Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. Charging stations, battery plants, EV fleets, BYD offered not just vehicles, but the full ecosystem. They didn't ask countries to adjust to them, they adapted to each market's needs. Tesla, by contrast, couldn't even clear customs. But the biggest shock came in Latin America. Argentina, Brazil, and Chile had once been prime targets for Tesla's solar energy division. But the trade wars made US imports politically radioactive. BYD stepped in and, almost overnight, replaced Tesla, not just with better pricing, but with easier access and fewer political headaches. While Musk was telling shareholders to hang tight, BYD was already picking up what Tesla had dropped. The secret to BYD's success? Structure. It wasn't magic, it was strategy. BYD controlled its entire supply chain, from lithium mines to final assembly. They didn't rely on cobalt from Canada or shipping partners in Europe. They didn't need subsidies to compete on price. Their supply chain was a fortress. Tesla's, by contrast, looked like a tangled web, held together by international goodwill that had long since dried up. And while Elon Musk made headlines for his online rants, BYD's founder, Wang Chuanfu, stayed out of the spotlight, calm, focused, and surgical. He let the results speak. Governments took notice. So did investors. And, more importantly, so did consumers. Within just 3 months, BYD turned Tesla's collapse into their own coronation. They didn't just beat Tesla in price or performance. They erased it from the global conversation. Elon Musk built the EV revolution. BYD simply claimed the throne. The world moves on. But perhaps the most painful blow wasn't from competitors. It was from the world itself. What started as a dip in quarterly numbers turned into something more ominous. A quiet, global erasure. Tesla, once the icon of innovation, was being left behind. Not just in the news, but in infrastructure plans, policy documents, and national strategies. In Europe, countries that once competed to host Tesla gigafactories were now pulling their support. EV incentives once designed with Tesla in mind were rewritten to prioritize local automakers or open source platforms. Germany and France led the shift, but others quickly followed. In some cities, Tesla-branded charging stations were removed and replaced with universal connectors. In others, Tesla's name disappeared from development roadmaps altogether. There were no protests, no angry speeches, just a slow, methodical removal. Clinical, not emotional. In Canada, the same story unfolded. EV infrastructure budgets were restructured. Grant programs quietly rewritten. The message was subtle but unmistakable. The world was done waiting for Tesla. The global rejection of Tesla governments around the world started rewriting the rules. And Tesla was no longer welcome. New EV funding policies excluded any company flagged for international supply chain instability. A not-so-subtle nod to Tesla. In Canada, provinces like Ontario and Quebec began redirecting funds towards smaller domestic startups and European partnerships. In Latin America, Tesla's solar energy projects were quietly shut down. Local contractors pulled out, and politicians cited the brand's growing reputational risks. Even in Asia, long considered a potential growth market, Tesla hit a wall. India, once seen as the gateway to South Asian manufacturing for Tesla, rejected its long-anticipated proposal, pointing instead to BYD's superior delivery record and reliability. Back in the US, city and state governments that once proudly partnered with Tesla began awarding EV fleet contracts to Ford, Rivian, and foreign-backed competitors. Tesla wasn't just losing business, it was being erased. What changed? Trust. Tesla no longer inspired confidence, not in policymakers, not in planners, and increasingly, not in the public. Elon Musk, once hailed as a bold disruptor, was now viewed as an unpredictable risk. And in a world racing toward electrification, no country was willing to bet its future on instability. Tesla had become the Nokia of EVs, a pioneer that started a revolution, only to be left behind by it. But the humiliation didn't end there. It sparked something even more volatile, a revolt from within. The labor uprising that shook America. They built his dream. Now they were tearing it down. Inside Tesla's factories in Fremont and Austin, a quiet anger turned into open rebellion. Workers who once felt like heroes in Musk's industrial revolution now felt like they were holding together a sinking ship. Overtime vanished. Stock options became worthless. Benefits were quietly trimmed. The unspoken message was clear: work harder, expect less. But the workforce had reached its limit. At first, there were scattered walkouts, silent protests during shifts, and unplanned absences. Then came organized picket lines. Then full-blown strikes. From Ohio to Nevada, Tesla workers mobilized. Labor unions, long kept at bay by Musk's aggressive anti-union stance, saw their opportunity and pounced. They rallied outside Tesla locations with signs reading, "We built this." He broke it. Employees who once idolized Musk now called him a reckless billionaire who gambled their futures on ego-driven decisions and lost. It wasn't just Tesla workers either. Employees from Ford, GM, and Rivian showed up in solidarity. What started as a company crisis had transformed into something larger, a national class struggle. Media outlets swarmed in. Viral clips surfaced of Tesla mechanics burning their uniforms. Former engineers came forward, revealing years of ignored complaints, manipulated pay structures, and toxic culture. In congressional hearings, labor leaders accused Musk of using nationalism as a shield while undermining American labor. Inside Tesla's executive offices, panic spread. Production slowed. Deliveries missed targets. Wall Street, already nervous, began pulling out. And no PR campaign could fix it. The workforce wasn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. They were flipping the whole thing over. How Tesla's collapse shocked the US economy. The fallout didn't stop with Tesla. It started with a single company, but within weeks, it had become a financial shockwave rippling through the entire American economy. For most Americans, Tesla wasn't just another automaker, it was a symbol of innovation, a source of national pride, the proof that Silicon Valley could still build the future. But when Tesla crashed, it didn't just take electric cars down with it, it took trust, capital, and confidence. The initial damage was massive, over $135 billion in value gone. That hit didn't just impact Elon Musk, it decimated pension funds, retirement accounts, and mutual funds that had bet heavily on Tesla's growth. Tesla stock had become a staple across portfolios, from government-run pension systems to millions of everyday Americans' 401ks. When the value vanished, so did their savings. By March 2025, financial advisors across the country were overwhelmed by panicked calls from retirees and working families. Their financial future had been wiped out, and the market was still falling. The dominoes kept falling. The Dow Jones plunged. The S&P 500 posted its worst quarterly performance in over a decade. Tesla's collapse triggered a wave of sell-offs across the tech sector. Companies that had hitched their valuations to Tesla's momentum suddenly looked overvalued and vulnerable. Investors started asking the unthinkable. Was this the first domino, or just the beginning of something worse? The ripple effect, from a company collapse to a national crisis. When Tesla stumbled, it wasn't just an automaker in trouble. It was the spark that ignited a broader economic fire. Banks were the first to react. Credit lines tightened, lending slowed to a crawl. Startups that had once thrived within Tesla's ecosystem, from battery suppliers to software firms to charging infrastructure companies, suddenly found themselves scrambling for survival. Creditors demanded collateral. Risk analysts downgraded everything tied to Tesla. And then came the real estate hit. In cities like Austin, Fremont, and Reno, all once booming thanks to Tesla's job engine, housing markets faltered. As layoffs rippled through Tesla, local economies began to feel the pain. Contractors lost deals, suppliers went silent, wages disappeared. The labor market followed suit. Job openings vanished. Factory towns slowed to a standstill. Unemployment ticked upward, especially in regions that had welcomed Tesla with open arms and tax breaks. States like California, Texas, and Nevada, who had invested heavily in Musk's promises, were now left holding the bag. Lawmakers who once called him a visionary were now facing angry voters asking, what went wrong? Tesla wasn't just another company. It had become too big to fail. And yet, it failed spectacularly. This wasn't just a crash. It was a wake-up call. A single company's fall revealed how much of the economy was propped up by hype, image, and the myth of a single genius. What collapsed wasn't just a balance sheet. It was the illusion that one man's dream could bend reality, that American innovation was bulletproof. As America dealt with the fallout, the rest of the world moved on, without it. The global trade shift, cutting America out. While Wall Street panicked and Washington tried to stabilize, something more profound was happening abroad. Countries weren't waiting for the US to recover. They were rewriting the global playbook and leaving America behind. It started quietly, closed-door meetings in Ottawa, Berlin, and Tokyo. But soon, those talks became policy. Canada signed a major new trade agreement with the EU and South Korea that bypassed US manufacturers entirely. Europe followed with reforms to EV subsidies that flat-out excluded American-made cars. In Latin America, public contracts once expected to go to Tesla were handed to Chinese and European competitors. Brazil inked a multi-billion-dollar EV deal with BYD. Argentina rewrote its import rules to benefit European battery platforms. In Asia, nations like Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia deepened their partnerships with Chinese firms, shutting the US out of rare earth mining, battery production, and recycling infrastructure for years to come. The message was unmistakable. The US had become an unreliable partner. Trade wars, tariff threats, political instability all made America a risky bet. Even longtime allies weren't willing to stake their economic futures on Washington's whims. Tesla had once stood as a symbol of American dominance in the green tech era. Now, it had become a warning, a case study in how quickly leadership can evaporate. The world wasn't waiting around. Europe rolled out EV infrastructure based on universal standards. African nations partnered with Chinese firms to control mineral exports. Canada locked in exclusive multi-year supply deals with South Korean and European automakers. A new global clean tech infrastructure was forming, and US companies weren't invited. The future was being built with different hands, on different terms, using different rules. And every time a new door opened, it was one America would no longer walk through. The fall of a symbol, Elon Musk's legacy unravels. Tesla didn't just sell cars, it sold a belief in innovation, in disruption, in the power of one man to reshape the future. For nearly 20 years, Elon Musk was celebrated as a genius, a rebel, a rule breaker who still came out on top. He built rockets, he pushed electric vehicles into the mainstream. He defied oil giants, regulators, and Wall Street, and won. Until he didn't. In the end, it wasn't a rival that brought him down. It wasn't sabotage or scandal. It was the system itself, the one he thought he could outsmart, that finally turned against him. The final days of Tesla weren't loud. They were quiet. Shareholders walked away. Workers went on strike. The stock plummeted more than 60%. Government support disappeared. Elon Musk, once the loudest voice in the room, became a punchline. A meme of yesterday's ambition. News outlets stopped reporting on Tesla as a company. They started treating it as a cautionary tale. Business schools began teaching its downfall as a lesson in hubris and overreach. Politicians kept their distance. Tech insiders whispered about how far, and fast, it had all fallen apart. Even former fans distanced themselves. Tesla logos were peeled off bumpers. Brand loyalty turned into public resentment. And then, silence. There was no big lawsuit, no dramatic court scene, no public apology. Just an eerie absence of momentum, of belief, of relevance. Tesla didn't explode. It evaporated. The dream didn't end in fire. It faded into fog. If you were surprised by Tesla's collapse, just wait. The next chapter of disruption is already being written, and the old rules no longer apply. Subscribe so you don't miss the stories others won't tell. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.